Buddhism atheistic? The truth might surprise you. Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel. Today, we're diving deep into one of the most misunderstood aspects of Buddhism, a question that has sparked debates for centuries. Is Buddhism a religion of atheism? Some say yes, pointing out that Buddhism has no concept of a creator God. Others argue that Buddhism isn't really about whether God exists or not. But what if I told you that both perspectives might be missing the bigger picture? Buddhism isn't just a matter of believing or disbelieving in a God. It's about something much more profound, something that goes beyond labels like atheist or theist. And if you stick with me through this episode, I promise you, this might just shift the way you see not only Buddhism, but religion, spirituality, and even the nature of reality itself. Why do people think Buddhism is atheistic? To understand this misconception, we need to go back, way back, to the time of the Buddha himself. In ancient India, religion was dominated by a belief in gods, rituals, and the authority of the Brahmin priests. The Buddha, however, didn't follow that path. He wasn't interested in debating the existence of gods. He was focused on something else entirely: the nature of human suffering and how to transcend it. When people asked him metaphysical questions, like whether the universe is eternal or if there is a God, the Buddha often remained silent. But why? Because in Buddhism, the ultimate question isn't whether God exists or not. The real question is, does this belief help end suffering? Think about that for a second. If a belief, whether in a God, a soul, or an afterlife, doesn't actually help you wake up from suffering, then from a Buddhist perspective, it's not the most important thing to focus on. What did the Buddha actually say? One of the most famous Buddhist parables, the parable of the poisoned arrow, explains this beautifully. Imagine a man is struck by a poisoned arrow. Instead of allowing the doctor to remove the arrow, he insists on knowing who shot it, what kind of wood the arrow is made of, what the feathers are from, what the poison is composed of, and he refuses treatment until he gets answers. But by the time all those answers come, he's dead. This, the Buddha said, is what happens when we get lost in endless philosophical debates. Instead of focusing on the most urgent question, how do we free ourselves from suffering, we waste time on things that don't immediately help us. So, when people say that Buddhism is atheistic, they're often missing the point. Buddhism isn't theistic or atheistic in the way most religions are. It's focused on direct experience, on how we relate to suffering, impermanence, and the nature of our own minds. But what about all the gods in Buddhism? Now, you might be thinking, wait, aren't there gods in Buddhism? What about all the celestial beings, the bodhisattvas, the different realms of existence? Yes, Buddhist traditions, especially in Mahayana and Vajrayana Buddhism, have gods, deities, and cosmic forces. But here's the key difference: they are not creators. In Buddhism, gods, whether we're talking about Hindu-style devas or compassionate bodhisattvas, are seen as beings who are also trapped in the cycle of birth and death, samsara. They might be more powerful, more blissful, but they are not ultimate. In fact, even the highest gods in Buddhist cosmology are still subject to impermanence. Eventually, their karma runs out, and they too must face suffering again. Buddhism teaches that the highest liberation isn't found in worshipping or depending on gods, but in understanding our own minds, breaking free from greed, hatred, and ignorance. So, is Buddhism atheistic or not? Here's the best way to put it. Buddhism isn't about rejecting or accepting God. It's about awakening. It's about seeing reality as it is, beyond concepts, beyond dogma. Some Buddhists believe in gods, some don't. Some practice Buddhism alongside other faiths. And that's okay, because Buddhism isn't about belief. It's about direct experience. At its core, Buddhism is about being human, understanding suffering, impermanence, and the nature of our minds. It doesn't ask us to worship. It doesn't ask us to blindly follow. It invites us to look deeply into our own experience and ask, what is suffering? What is the cause of suffering? Can we be free from it? And how? Final thoughts. So, is Buddhism atheistic? Not exactly, but it's also not theistic in the way many religions are. Buddhism is about going beyond the question of does God exist, and instead asking, how do we wake up? And that's what makes it so powerful. If this episode got you thinking, drop a comment below. What's your take? Do you think Buddhism should be called atheistic, or is it something else entirely? Let's get the conversation going. And if you want more deep dives into Buddhist philosophy, mindfulness, and the human experience, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell so you don't miss what's coming next. Until next time, stay present, stay curious, and keep walking the path. When Western scholars first encountered Buddhism, they struggled to define it. They looked at it through the lens of their own religious traditions, primarily Christianity, where faith revolves around a supreme being, a divine creator, a God who governs the universe. But when they turned to Buddhism, they found something radically different. There was no almighty God, no all-powerful creator watching over humanity. Instead, they found a man, a human being named Siddhartha Gautama, who later became known as the Buddha. He didn't claim to be divine. He didn't say he had been chosen by a higher power. He didn't demand worship. He simply said, I have awakened. He didn't offer salvation through faith in a God. Instead, he offered a path, a way out of suffering that anyone, regardless of belief, could walk. So naturally, many Western thinkers jump to a conclusion, no God, then this must be atheism. But this assumption is far too simplistic. Buddhism doesn't fit neatly into the categories of theism or atheism. It's something else entirely. Yes, Buddhism does not center around a creator deity, but that doesn't mean it outright denies the existence of higher beings. In fact, Buddhist cosmology includes numerous celestial beings, devas, bodhisattvas, enlightened masters who guide others. But here's the key difference. They are not creators. They are not all-powerful. They are not the answer to human suffering. The Buddha wasn't interested in debating whether or not a God exists. He saw those kinds of arguments as distractions. Think about it this way. Imagine you're standing in a burning house. Smoke is filling the air. Flames are rising around you. In that moment, do you stop and argue about who started the fire? Or do you run for the exit? For the Buddha, the most urgent question wasn't who created the universe. It was, how do we get out of suffering? This is why he stayed silent when asked about the existence of a God. He wasn't trying to be mysterious. He simply understood that these questions, while interesting, don't lead to real liberation. Because whether a God exists or not, people still suffer. They still experience loss, pain, aging, and death. And no belief system, not theism, atheism, or anything in between, can change that fundamental reality. So instead of focusing on metaphysical debates, the Buddha offered something practical, a method, a way to break free from suffering through understanding the nature of reality, practicing mindfulness, and cultivating wisdom and compassion. Buddhism isn't about blind faith. It's about direct experience. It's about looking at life as it really is, beyond our conditioning, beyond our beliefs, beyond labels like atheist or theist. At its core, Buddhism is about being human. It teaches that no one, not even the highest gods, can save you. The only one who can truly free you from suffering is you. And that's a radical idea, because it means that enlightenment isn't something granted from above. It's something cultivated from within. So, is Buddhism atheistic? Not in the way people usually think, but it's also not theistic in the traditional sense. It's something deeper. It's an invitation to wake up, not to argue over gods and doctrines, but to experience reality directly, to see the impermanence of all things, and to walk a path that leads beyond suffering. That's the real heart of Buddhism, and that's what makes it so powerful. What do you think? Does Buddhism fit into the category of atheism, or is it something else entirely? Let me know in the comments. I'd love to hear your perspective. And if you found this episode thought-provoking, make sure to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell. There's a lot more to explore when it comes to Buddhism, mindfulness, and the human experience. Until next time, stay present, stay curious, and keep walking the path. Buddhism isn't about accepting a set of doctrines or following a belief system just because someone says so. It's about something much more personal, much more profound. It's about direct experience, seeing the truth for yourself, not because a book says it, not because a teacher claims it, not because it's a tradition passed down for generations. This is why the Buddha's teachings focus on practice rather than faith. He didn't ask for blind belief. He didn't say, "Just trust me." Instead, he offered a path, one that anyone can walk, one that leads not to dogma, but to awakening. He taught something simple yet revolutionary. Suffering exists. It has a cause. There is a way to end it. And you can see this for yourself, not in some afterlife, not in another world, but right here, in this very moment. And this is where Buddhism is different from so many other traditions. It doesn't demand that you believe in something unseen, something beyond human comprehension. Instead, it says, "Come and see for yourself." This phrase, so simple yet so powerful, captures the essence of Buddhism. The Kalama Sutta, a teaching for all seekers, one of the most profound Buddhist texts. The Kalama Sutta teaches exactly this. In it, the Buddha speaks to a group of villagers, the Kalamas, who are confused by the many religious teachers who visit their town, each claiming to have the one true teaching. The Kalamas ask the Buddha, "How do we know who to believe? One teacher says this, another says that. Each claims to have the truth, but they contradict one another. How do we find what is real? And what does the Buddha say?" He doesn't tell them to follow him. He doesn't tell them to take his word for it. Instead, he tells them, do not believe something just because it is written in scripture. Do not believe something just because a teacher says it. Do not believe something just because it has been passed down for generations. Rather, test it, observe it, see if it leads to peace, to clarity, to freedom from suffering. If it does, then follow it. If it does not, let it go. This is one of the most radical teachings in all of spirituality, because it means that truth is not something given from above. It's something you must discover within yourself. Beyond faith, a path of transformation, and this is where Buddhism stands apart. It's not about faith in something external. It's about transforming our own minds. It's about shifting the way we see the world, not through beliefs, but through direct experience. Think about it. You don't need faith to know that fire burns. If you touch it, you feel the heat. You don't need to believe in gravity. You experience it every time you take a step. Buddhism works the same way. It asks, what is suffering? Where does it come from? Can it be ended? And rather than giving you an abstract answer, it hands you the tools to find out for yourself. Meditation, mindfulness, ethical living. These aren't just spiritual practices. They're ways of seeing reality as it truly is. And once you see clearly, you no longer need to believe. You simply know. The human experience, a journey inward. This is why Buddhism is so deeply human. It's not about gods or scriptures or distant realms. It's about what is happening right here, in this moment. It's about the way we react to joy and sorrow, the way we cling to pleasure and resist pain, the way we get lost in thoughts that pull us away from the present. It's about waking up to what has always been here, the truth of life itself. And the Buddha, he wasn't a god, or a savior, or a prophet. He was a human being, just like you, just like me, who saw things as they truly are and shared what he learned, not so that we could worship him, but so that we could wake up too. Final thought. So, if there's one thing to take away from this, it's this. Don't believe something just because it sounds good. Don't follow something just because others do. Find out for yourself. That is the heart of Buddhism, not faith, not belief, but awakening. And that is what makes it so powerful. So, what do you think? Have you ever questioned your own beliefs? Tested them against your own experience? Let me know in the comments. I'd love to hear your thoughts. And if this spoke to you, if you want to explore more about Buddhism, mindfulness, and the journey of being human, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell. There's so much more to discover. Until next time, stay present, stay curious, and keep walking the path. Here's where things get really interesting. In Buddhist cosmology, there are gods, but not in the way most people think. They aren't all-powerful. They aren't creators. They aren't rulers of the universe. They are simply beings, just like us, but existing on a different level of reality. Some are more powerful than humans, some less. Some live in realms of immense pleasure and bliss, while others experience suffering beyond anything we can imagine. But here's the key difference between Buddhist cosmology and many Western religious traditions. No being, God or human, is ultimately in control. Everything arises and passes away due to karma and dependent origination. The story of Brahmasahampati, a god who bowed to a human. One of the most fascinating stories in Buddhism is about Brahmasahampati, a god from a high celestial realm. After the Buddha attained enlightenment, he at first hesitated to teach. He saw how deeply people were trapped in ignorance, how their attachments and delusions clouded their understanding. He wondered, will anyone even be able to understand this? But then, something incredible happened. Brahmasahampati, a being of great power, descended from the higher realms, knelt before the Buddha, and begged him to teach. Think about that for a second. A god, a being that most people would consider divine, far superior to humans, humbled himself before a human being. Why? Because even celestial beings recognized the Buddha's wisdom. They understood that the path to true liberation, to complete freedom from suffering, was something that even gods had not yet realized. This moment is profound because it turns the traditional religious hierarchy upside down. In Buddhism, even the gods are not beyond suffering. They may live for eons in blissful realms, but eventually their karma will run out, and they too will experience loss, decay, and rebirth. Unlike in many theistic traditions, where gods are seen as eternal rulers, Buddhism sees them as temporary beings, subject to the same universal law of impermanence that governs all existence. So, does Buddhism believe in God? Not in the way that Western religions do. Buddhism neither worships nor denies the existence of powerful beings. It simply sees them as part of the vast web of existence, beings with their own karma, their own struggles, their own limitations. This is a huge shift from the way most people think about religion. There is no creator sitting above, judging or controlling the fate of the universe. No divine plan. No eternal paradise or damnation. Instead, there is a natural law, cause and effect, karma and rebirth, impermanence and interdependence. And what does this mean for us? It means that whether gods exist or not, it doesn't change the fact that suffering is real. It doesn't change the fact that we experience loss, aging, sickness, and death. It doesn't change the fact that we crave things that won't last, that we cling to what we love, that we fear what we don't understand. This is what makes Buddhism so deeply human. It doesn't distract us with debates about divinity. It brings us back to the present, to the raw truth of our experience. The Buddha didn't teach people to pray to gods for salvation. He didn't tell them to seek divine intervention. He said, "See for yourself, walk the path, free your own mind, because no God, no external force can do it for you." The real message, look beyond belief. So if you've ever wondered, does Buddhism believe in God? The answer is, it doesn't matter. What matters is the suffering we experience, the way we react to the world, and the way we choose to live. Because whether gods exist or not, you still wake up every morning with your own mind. You still experience joy and pain. You still have to navigate life, relationships, loss, and meaning. Buddhism doesn't ask you to believe. It asks you to look. Look at your own thoughts, your own habits, your own emotions. See how they arise and fade away, just like everything else. This is what liberation is. Not belief, not blind faith, but understanding. Final thoughts. So what do you think? Does Buddhism's view on gods challenge your understanding of spirituality? Do you think belief in a creator is necessary for a meaningful life? Or is there something beyond that? Let's talk in the comments. I'd love to hear your thoughts. And if you enjoyed this discussion, make sure to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell. There's so much more to explore about Buddhism, mindfulness, and what it truly means to be human. Until next time, stay present, stay curious, and keep walking the path. Have you ever wondered who you really are? Not just your name, your job, or your personality, but at the deepest level, what makes you you? Most of us go through life believing we have a core, unchanging self, something permanent that defines who we are. But Buddhism teaches something radically different. It teaches anatta, the doctrine of no self. And once you truly understand it, it has the power to change everything. Buddhism challenges the very way we see ourselves. Unlike many religions that speak of an eternal soul, the Buddha taught that the idea of a fixed, permanent self is just an illusion. Think about it. Are you the same person you were 10 years ago? Your thoughts have changed. Your body has changed. Your emotions, beliefs, and experiences are constantly shifting. So where is this unchanging self we hold onto so tightly? The truth is, what we call me is just a collection of passing sensations, emotions, and thoughts, stitched together by memory. We are a flowing river, not a solid rock. One day, a wandering philosopher named Vacchagotta approached the Buddha with a deep question. Does the self exist? The Buddha remained silent. Confused, Vacchagotta asked again, then does the self not exist? Still, the Buddha said nothing. Why? Because answering yes would reinforce the illusion of a permanent self, and answering no might send Vacchagotta into confusion, thinking that nothing exists at all. The Buddha understood that the truth could not be captured in a simple yes or no. So if there's no fixed self, what happens after death? What continues? That's where karma and rebirth come in, but probably not in the way you might think. Rebirth in Buddhism isn't about a soul jumping from one body to another. Instead, it's like a flame being passed from one candle to the next. The fire isn't the same, but the energy continues. Think of it this way. Your actions, words, and thoughts create ripples, shaping what comes next. It's not about who is reborn, but rather what is reborn, the effects of your choices, your habits, and your intentions. This is why mindfulness and compassion are so important. The way we live right now shapes what comes next in this life and beyond. So, what does all this mean for us as human beings? It means freedom. If the self is an illusion, then we don't have to be prisoners of our past. We don't have to be trapped by labels, identities, or the stories we tell ourselves. We are free to change, to grow, to become something new, moment by moment, breath by breath. Understanding anatta isn't about falling into despair. It's about waking up. It's about seeing life as it truly is, fluid, interconnected, and full of infinite possibilities. Let go of the idea of a fixed me, and what you'll find is something far greater, an ever-changing, interconnected flow of existence. And maybe, just maybe, that's what it truly means to be human. Interestingly, modern science is beginning to echo ideas that Buddhism has taught for over 2,500 years. Neuroscientists now confirm that our sense of self is fluid and ever-changing, just as the Buddha taught with anatta, the doctrine of no self. Our thoughts, emotions, and even our neural pathways are constantly being reshaped by experience. The person we are today is not the person we were a year ago, or even a moment ago. Quantum physics, too, is revealing something deeply familiar to Buddhist philosophy. It suggests that reality is not as solid or separate as it appears. At a fundamental level, everything is interconnected, much like the Buddhist concept of dependent origination, which teaches that nothing exists independently, but only in relation to everything else. The boundaries we believe define us, between self and other, between observer and observed, are illusions. We are part of a vast, interconnected flow of existence. And then there's mindfulness meditation, a practice rooted in Buddhist tradition that is now one of the most widely studied subjects in modern psychology. Countless studies show that mindfulness reduces stress, improves focus, and even rewires the brain for greater happiness and emotional resilience. What was once seen as an ancient spiritual practice is now recognized as a powerful, scientifically backed tool for well-being. So, is Buddhism a religion, a philosophy, or a science of the mind? Perhaps it is all three. It doesn't ask for blind faith. Instead, it invites us to look deeply, to investigate, to experience the truth for ourselves. The Buddha didn't claim to be a god. He was a human being, just like us, who awakened to a profound understanding of reality, and he left behind a path, a way to free ourselves from suffering and live with greater clarity, peace, and wisdom. But how can we bring this wisdom into our daily lives? It starts with simple yet profound practices. Mindfulness, being fully present in the moment, aware of our thoughts, feelings, and surroundings without judgment. Compassion, not just for others, but for ourselves as well, treating all beings with kindness and understanding. And wisdom, seeing the impermanence of all things, embracing change rather than fearing it. These aren't just religious ideas, they are practical tools for happiness, for inner peace, for resilience in the face of life's challenges. In a world that constantly pulls us in 1,000 directions, where stress and anxiety seem unavoidable, Buddhist wisdom offers something revolutionary: the power to return to the present, to cultivate awareness, and to live with greater intention. Imagine waking up each day with a clear mind, unburdened by regrets of the past or worries about the future. Imagine moving through life with a sense of deep connection, knowing that you are not separate, but part of something vast and ever unfolding. This is what Buddhism teaches, not as a doctrine to believe in, but as a way of being, a path to walk. And the best part? You don't have to be a Buddhist to practice it. You just have to be human. So let's settle the question once and for all. Is Buddhism atheistic? The answer isn't as simple as yes or no. In fact, Buddhism doesn't fit neatly into the categories that many of us in the West are used to. It's not about believing or disbelieving in a god. It's about seeing reality as it truly is. Unlike many religions that center around the worship of a deity, Buddhism takes a different approach. It doesn't begin with the question of God. Instead, it asks something far more urgent: what causes suffering, and how can we end it? That's the heart of the Buddha's teaching. He wasn't interested in abstract metaphysical debates. He was concerned with the direct experience of human suffering and, more importantly, how to free ourselves from it. Think about it. Does knowing whether a God exists change the fact that we experience pain, loss, and uncertainty? Would having an answer to that question free us from anxiety, anger, and attachment? The Buddha realized that, ultimately, these questions don't lead to liberation. That's why he remained silent when asked about the existence of a creator. Instead, he taught the Four Noble Truths, the recognition that suffering exists, that it has a cause, that it can end, and that there is a path to freedom. So, does that make Buddhism atheistic? Not exactly. Some schools of Buddhism accept the existence of deities, but these beings are not seen as all-powerful creators, nor are they the focus of practice. They too are subject to karma and impermanence, just like humans. Other Buddhist traditions remain entirely non-theistic, focusing solely on the mind, meditation, and wisdom. But here's the real takeaway. Whether or not gods exist is beside the point in Buddhism. What matters is the present moment. What matters is how we live, how we treat others, and how we awaken to the truth of our own minds. The Buddha never asked his followers to believe in something blindly. Instead, he urged them to investigate, to question, and to experience the truth directly for themselves. And maybe that's the most important lesson of all. Instead of getting caught up in debates about existence, Buddhism teaches us to focus on what we can do right now to ease suffering, our own and that of others. Imagine a world where we spent less time arguing about belief and more time practicing compassion, wisdom, and mindfulness. What kind of transformation could that bring? If this discussion shifted your perspective, let me know in the comments. And if you're hungry for more deep dives into Buddhism, philosophy, and the human experience, don't forget to subscribe and hit that like button. This journey of understanding is just beginning,